In this podcast episode, Cal Newport explores the profound crisis in modern attention, dissecting the causes and consequences of hyperactive communication culture, digital distractions, and the challenges of deep, focused work in today's knowledge economy. He reflects on his decade-long journey since the release of deep work, critiques the persistence of fragmented attention despite awareness, examines the impact and limits of AI and quantum computing on productivity, and offers practical insights on reclaiming focused mental capacity, workload management, and the evolving nature of collaboration and learning. Cal Newport begins by acknowledging his early recognition of how social media and communication tools like email, Slack, and Microsoft Teams were fundamentally degrading focus and productivity. Rather than predicting the future, he identified irrational practices in how knowledge workers managed their attention and collaboration even a decade ago. His skepticism about the ubiquity of social media and the hyperactive hive mind of constant digital messaging was initially met with resistance, but has now become a commonplace concern. Unfortunately, despite growing awareness, the problematic patterns, such as frequent interruptions and multitasking, have intensified rather than improved. The Microsoft 365 productivity reports reveal interruptions every 2 minutes on average, illustrating the severity of fragmented attention today. Newport describes the hyperactive hive mind as an inherently inefficient and mentally exhausting collaboration style characterized by nonstop, unscheduled back-and-forth messaging. Technologies like Slack appeal to this style by optimizing real-time ad hoc communication, but they make it even harder to engage in deep work. He explains the neurological basis. Switching between unrelated abstract tasks requires 10 to 20 minutes of cognitive reorientation each time, taxing the brain's capacity. The result is chronic cognitive fatigue and profound dissatisfaction at work, as workers are never allowed to settle into a focused, productive flow state. Attempting to unilaterally impose limits on digital interruptions, like checking Slack only at certain times, often fails because of the structural demands of today's work. The nature of many projects requires rapid, sequential exchanges of information in real time, meaning that employees feel compelled to constantly monitor their inboxes. Newport stresses that the problem is not just individual discipline, but the communication protocols and workload distribution within organizations. Without systemic change, it's nearly impossible to escape constant context switching. Over the last decade, Newport has identified 3 core components necessary for recovering meaningful focus and productivity. First is training personal ability to focus by practicing deep work and resisting distractions. Second is reforming communication protocols to reduce hyperactive messaging and prioritize planned synchronous interaction. Third is managing workload explicitly, setting limits on how much concurrent work individuals are expected to handle, and creating transparency about responsibilities to prevent overload. He highlights that these are complex cultural and organizational shifts, and there is no single fix. Among his published insights, Newport emphasizes 2 strategies that deliver the greatest returns: developing focus as a skill to train the brain for sustained attention, and rigorously controlling workload by learning to say no to opportunities and avoid overcommitment. The latter, although difficult for most, is critical, as constantly saying yes leads to inefficient multitasking and diminishing returns overall. Reducing scope and setting priorities is a fundamental but under-practiced skill in knowledge work. Newport critiques the prevailing ethos of always-on work as misaligned with human cognitive architecture. Meeting culture, fragmented calendar blocks, and continuous messaging tie workers to exhausting mental states. He compares this to the evolution of Silicon Valley productivity ideals based on computer processor throughput, valuing never-ending work pipelines that are antithetical to human needs for focused, deep effort. The resulting overload causes pervasive burnout and underperformance masked by appearances of busyness. Discussing 4-day workweek trials from Europe and Iceland, Newport notes that cutting a day without changing other work habits did not reduce productivity, which signals that much of the current workday is consumed by low-value activities and distractions. This finding reinforces his assertion that contemporary knowledge work is rife with inefficiencies and that cultural transformation, rather than simply more hours, is required to improve output. Newport addresses the rapid adoption of generative AI and large language models, noting that rather than solving existing problems, AI currently exacerbates some dysfunctions. He highlights the phenomenon of work slop, AI-generated, low-quality outputs that add cognitive overhead rather than reduce it. Workers increasingly rely on AI to avoid mental strain, producing quantity over quality, which degrades the signal-to-noise ratio in professional communication. He acknowledges AI's utility for reducing blank page inertia, but cautions that users must build and maintain their cognitive resilience to remain competitive. While acknowledging the improvements brought by models like GPT-4, Newport cautions against viewing AI progress as a linear path toward a single, monolithic general intelligence. Rather, he predicts the future will be a landscape of many specialized AI systems, each optimized for specific tasks, integrated with language models and logic engines. This distributed AGI approach contrasts with popular media depictions of a unified superintelligence and highlights the complexities and limitations of current architectures. Given AI's current strengths and weaknesses, Newport advises focusing on enduring human capacities that machines struggle to replicate, tolerating and embracing cognitive strain, learning harder skills, deep thinking, and sustained concentration. Thoughtful, challenging mental work will differentiate individuals in the evolving labor market as routine tasks become automated or outsourced. Cultivating a mindset that values cognitive toughness is a critical competitive strategy going forward. Newport shares his vision for redesigning workplaces to combat the low-energy trap of hyperactive, reactive communication cultures. This includes explicit workload transparency, limiting the number of concurrent tasks an individual handles, segregating tasks that are not actively worked on into shared organizational inboxes, and minimizing digital ad hoc messaging to brief, single-answer exchanges only. He advocates structured office hours and daily team stand-ups for synchronous coordination, thus replacing constant inbox monitoring with focused effort periods. Above all, he stresses making deep work a cultural priority discussed openly to raise awareness and normative practice. Introducing constraints, such as banning Slack or email communication during specific blocks of time, can help shield employees' morning focus sessions from distraction. Newport and the host agree that pairing communication fasting with structured daily planning and accountability meetings can yield better work habits without increasing stress. Such intermittent fasting around messaging can recondition organizational rhythms to favor concentration. Newport elaborates on reading as foundational calisthenics for the brain, transforming neural pathways to enable modern abstract thought. He contrasts the cognitive impact of intensive reading of well-crafted long-form books, products of years of careful thought and revision, with the shallow, rapid consumption of digital content such as short Substack articles. He stresses that deep reading rewires the brain for complex reasoning and nuanced understanding, while fragmentary digital reading encourages oversimplification, polarization, and fragile notions of truth. The episode discusses how the dominance of brief, digestible online content distorts epistemic habits, producing premature certitude and polarized views. Newport warns that this shallow engagement inhibits the mental effort necessary to grapple with complexity and subtlety. The loss of exposure to well-structured arguments and counter-arguments deprives readers of developing robust frameworks for truth discernment. Cal briefly addresses hype around quantum computing's potential impact on AI, dispelling unrealistic expectations. He explains that quantum computing solves extremely narrow problem types and is not a general-purpose accelerator of AI development. Practical constraints, error accumulation, and the fundamentally different architecture mean quantum machines are unlikely to serve as a magic bullet for current AI challenges. Quantum AI research exists, but remains nascent. Newport anticipates the current chatbot text interface to be a transitory phase of AI adoption. Future AI interactions will become deeply integrated into applications and workflows, operating more through domain-specific assistants and agentic systems rather than generalized conversational models. This shift will help overcome challenges with anthropomorphizing AI and improve practical utility. Reinforcing his theme of meaningful work, Newport argues that output-based accountability, where success is judged by clear value production rather than signals of busyness or responsiveness, is key to breaking out of the distraction cycle. He encourages workers to seek or create roles where deliverables are unambiguous, enabling them to resist constant communication demands and prioritize deep work without penalty. The capacity to say no to opportunities and demands is framed as an essential skill, especially as individuals' careers progress and options multiply. Newport notes that rejecting inferior options in favor of preserving time is necessary to prevent dilution of efforts. He describes adopting a default no stance as a disciplined method to safeguard attention and work quality. Newport underscores that focus is a trainable skill requiring deliberate practice. He compares cognitive strain to the physical burn a weightlifter endures and embraces, urging professionals to become comfortable pushing into mental difficulty as a sign of growth. He highlights that fostering a culture supportive of deep work and removing barriers is crucial for collective success. Marking the 10-year milestone of deep work, Newport expresses mixed feelings. Pride in the widespread adoption of the concept, but frustration that systemic change in work culture and attention management remains elusive or regressive. He posits that entrenched incentives favor distraction and immediate availability, making it an uphill battle to reclaim deep focus at scale. Ultimately, Newport asserts that individual efforts to resist distraction or manage workload will fall short without organizational commitment to redesigning communication norms, workload limits, and expectations around real-time interaction. He describes the current state as a local energy minimum, an entrenched suboptimal equilibrium from which escaping requires coordinated, sustained effort and leadership buy-in. Delving into the neuroscience of reading, Newport explains that deep reading is a learned process that rewires the brain's neural circuits, integrating visual, linguistic, and higher-order conceptual areas to enable complex understanding. This process forms the foundation of modern cognitive abilities and sustained learning, emphasizing the importance of long-form reading for intellectual development and richness of thought. Drawing on his personal experience and examples, such as legal professionals misusing AI-generated documents, Newport highlights the prevalence of hallucinations or fabricated information from language models. He stresses the critical need for verifying AI outputs and maintaining human oversight to prevent costly errors, underscoring the technological and epistemic limitations that remain. Cal directs listeners to his website, podcast, newsletter, and books for ongoing insights into productivity, attention, and technology's impact on knowledge work. His prolific output continues to shape discourse around focus, distraction, and meaningful work in the digital age.